Picture a grass court in Birmingham at the start of June. A 21-year-old walks out, and before her opponent has had a chance to settle, she's already been bageled, 6-0 in the opening set. It happens so fast, so cleanly, that if you had looked away for even a moment, you might have missed the whole thing. 6 days after that, the same young woman is standing with a trophy in her hands, and the version of her that tennis insiders thought they had figured out 12 months earlier, that version simply doesn't exist anymore. For the longest time, the scouting reports on this player read almost like an afterthought. A promising mover, a solid baseline presence, someone worth keeping an eye on eventually. The kind of prospect you file away and revisit in a couple of years when the ranking has climbed a little and the results have started to mean something. Then she went to England and tore that file apart completely. Over 3 weeks on grass, she put together 9 wins, knocked out 2 top 10 opponents, captured her first professional title, and climbed all the way to 29 in the world. And when the Wimbledon draw came out and her name landed inside the seeded bracket, history had already been made before she had struck a single competitive ball at the All England Club. Nobody from the Philippines, man or woman, in the entire recorded history of professional tennis had ever carried a seeding into a Grand Slam. Eala did it at 21 years old. That detail alone should stop you in your tracks for a second, because the kind of journey it takes to get there, clawing through the brutal middle ranks of professional tennis week after week, tournament after tournament, against players who have been doing this for a decade longer than you, is not something that happens by accident. And yet here she is, seeded at Wimbledon, a first-round match waiting. And what happens next is genuinely complicated in ways that the surface-level narrative doesn't quite capture. The draw paired her against a Mexican veteran who has been grinding on the professional tour since 2012. Think about that for a second. When this opponent first stepped onto a professional court, Eala was a 7-year-old kid who probably hadn't picked up a racket seriously yet. 14 years on the circuit teaches you things that raw talent simply cannot shortcut. And this particular opponent has built an entire career out of making people deeply uncomfortable on a tennis court. Not through firepower, not through a massive serve or a punishing forehand that wins points outright, through something far more insidious than that. She steals your rhythm. She steals your timing. She turns a match into something that feels like it's being played at the wrong speed, like someone has quietly adjusted the tempo without telling you, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already down a break and searching for answers that aren't coming. The pace of the ball changes constantly. A deep, heavy push into the corner is followed immediately by something softer that dies short. Then a lob floated over your head into the open court. Then something angled wide that drags you off the court entirely. There's no consistent beat to read, no reliable rhythm to lock onto. And the longer a match goes against her, the more the confusion compounds. Now here's the detail that turns this particular first-round match into something worth genuinely paying attention to, rather than a routine opener that gets glossed over on the broadcast schedule. This veteran has already done exactly this to Eala once before. She has the blueprint, she's used it, it worked. And the story of exactly how it played out is worth taking your time with before Wimbledon begins. Rewind to August of 2024. A hard court event in North Carolina. Eala was ranked outside the top 100 at the time, still finding her footing, still mapping out the ceiling of what she was capable of. Her veteran opponent was climbing toward what would eventually become a career high ranking somewhere in the 50s. They met in the quarterfinals, and Eala came out absolutely flying. She took the first set 6-3, hitting flat and clean, dictating almost every single exchange, looking every inch the superior player on that particular afternoon. If you had tuned in halfway through that opening set, you would have assumed the match was already decided and you hadn't missed much. Then something shifted. The veteran stopped trying to match Eala's aggression. Instead, she began feeding the ball deeper and slower, mixing speeds in a way that quietly, almost invisibly, began eroding Eala's timing. Shots that had been landing right on the lines started drifting wide by a fraction. Unforced errors crept into the picture. The serve, which has always been the most vulnerable part of Eala's game, began leaking double faults at exactly the moments she could least afford them. And the veteran, who had absorbed an entire set's worth of punishment without flinching, rode that wave all the way home. She took the second set, then she ran away with the third, walked off the court having stolen a match that had looked completely lost just an hour earlier. That kind of defeat sits differently in your memory than getting blown off the court by someone who is simply better than you. When you feel like you're in complete control, when the match is going exactly the way you planned, and then you watch it dissolve point by point through your own hands, that leaves a very specific and deeply uncomfortable mark. The exact feeling of what one opponent did to you on one particular afternoon, the exact sequence of events that turned a match around. That memory doesn't fade quickly. Now, take that memory and drop it onto the grass at Wimbledon, a completely different surface, infinitely higher stakes, a draw that carries the weight of an entire nation watching, and a player who is, by almost every measurable standard, not remotely the same person who walked off that court in North Carolina nearly 2 years ago. In January of 2025, Eala was sitting around 140 in the world. By March of 2026, she had touched 29. Climbing through that brutal middle stretch of the rankings, the range between 50 and 150 where so many promising careers stall out for years and sometimes forever, doesn't happen through occasional good weeks. It happens through relentless, grinding consistency, showing up week after week and collecting results even when the draw is difficult, even when the surface isn't your best, even when the travel and the fatigue are compounding in the background. And that is exactly what Eala delivered. Quarterfinals in Dubai, round of 16 at Indian Wells, round of 16 in Miami, all on hard court, the surface that everyone assumed was her natural home, the one she would build her game around long term. The results were steady, professional, quietly impressive, the kind of ranking climb that doesn't generate viral moments, but absolutely moves the needle. And then the grass swing arrived, and suddenly, everything people thought they understood about her game got turned completely upside down. Birmingham was the opening statement. She entered as the top seed, dropped exactly one set across the entire tournament, and even that lone set came in a final where she was pushed hard before closing it out 7-5. There's footage from the exact moment match point landed, her standing at the net, hand over her mouth, completely frozen for a second, absorbing the reality that she had just won her first professional title on grass, of all surfaces, the one place absolutely nobody had predicted fireworks from her. The reaction on her face in that moment wasn't performance, it was genuine, unfiltered disbelief mixed with something that looked a lot like relief. She arrived in Berlin the following week as a wildcard, ranked 35th on the entry list, the kind of name most people skim past on a draw sheet without giving a second thought. And then she beat the world number 2, 6-7 in the first set, 6-4 in the second, against a player whose serve generates the kind of raw power that should in theory completely overwhelm someone who builds her game on timing and angles rather than brute force. The world number 2 finished that match with over 40 unforced errors. A significant portion of that came directly from the depth and flatness Eala kept delivering off the baseline, never once giving her opponent a comfortable rhythm to settle into. That is not luck. That is a game plan, executed cleanly, under the brightest possible kind of pressure, against one of the genuinely best players alive.
Then came the world number 8, a defender whose instincts normally suffocate exactly the aggressive, flat-hitting style that Eala relies on. She jumped out to a 3-love lead in the first set and never let go. Final score? 6-3, 6-4, done in under 90 minutes. 2 consecutive top 10 scalps inside a single mid-tier event where she had arrived as a wild card that almost the entire tennis world had ignored. The semifinal didn't go her way, a clean loss to a ball-striking force who can end points before you've had any chance to redirect, and there's no shame attached to that result whatsoever. But the Berlin run had already revealed something crucial about exactly how she plays on this surface, and understanding it is the key to understanding what her veteran opponent is actually walking into on Monday. On grass, Eala takes the ball ridiculously early. That phrase gets thrown around loosely in commentary boxes everywhere, but for her, it is the entire foundation of how she operates on this surface. She sets up well inside the baseline and meets the ball as it is still rising, which on grass, where the bounce stays low and the pace stays quick, turns her ground strokes into skidding, flat missiles that barely clear the net and stay near ankle height by the time they reach the other side of the court. Think carefully about what that actually means for whoever is standing across the net trying to deal with it. Grass doesn't offer the generous looping bounce that clay does. A flat strike on this surface stays low, keeps traveling fast, keeps moving forward. When Eala rips a backhand cross-court at shin level, her opponent has to dig the racket downward from a compromised body position just to make contact. When she redirects a forehand down the line, the ball is arriving before the defender has even finished resetting her feet. There is no time to breathe, no moment to reset, no window where the pace slows down enough to allow a comfortable decision. This is exactly why her numbers look so dramatically different depending on which surface she's standing on. 4 wins and 6 losses on clay this season because the red dirt slows everything down and bounces higher and gives opponents all the time they need to recover and reset. And those same devastating flat trajectories that destroy people on grass simply sit up invitingly on clay, begging to be attacked. On grass, though, she's essentially playing a different sport, one that suits her far better than anyone appears to have predicted even 12 months ago. The question is how her veteran opponent fits into all of this, and why the ranking gap matters so much less than it looks on paper. Standing barely over 5'3" and weighing around 121 pounds, the veteran has never been a player who overpowers opponents or generates pace that creates errors on its own. What she does instead, the precise skill that has kept her competitive on the professional tour for 14 years, is deny you the tempo you are craving. She varies the speed of everything constantly. A deep, slow push into the backhand corner, followed immediately by a drop shot that dies just before the service line. An absorbed first strike redirected with just enough angle to drag you wide. Then a lob dropped into exactly the space you just vacated. Her entire philosophy is built around a single idea: force the other player to manufacture pace out of nothing, then feed off whatever falls short of the mark. Against someone who thrives on rhythm and uses an opponent's own pace to fuel her own game, this is potentially the most dangerous weapon the veteran possesses. Go back and look closely at what actually happened in those second and third sets in Carolina. Eala was winning while she controlled the tempo. The instant her opponent yanked that tempo away and dismantled the pattern she had been thriving inside, the match transformed completely. She had to start generating her own pace instead of simply redirecting what was coming at her. Her game shrank, got tighter, more hesitant. The serve started leaking double faults. The margins narrowed, and the veteran, who had spent an entire set absorbing punishment, suddenly looked like the calmer, more composed player on that court. That is the memory hanging over this matchup. That is the specific blueprint the veteran already knows works against this specific opponent. The problem is that the surface beneath her feet on Monday does not cooperate with her style of tennis at all. Her career grass court record sits at 12 wins and 14 losses. In 2026 specifically, she's 3-4 on the lawns. Her most recent grass tournament before arriving at Wimbledon ended in a qualifying loss to someone ranked well outside the top 100. Before that, a first-round exit by the score of 6-1, 6-2. These are not the numbers of someone arriving at the All England club full of confidence and momentum.
The patient, defensive style that makes her so dangerous on hard courts and clay simply loses its teeth on grass because the ball doesn't bounce high enough for her to comfortably get underneath it. At 5'3", playing from well behind the baseline on a surface where everything skids through low and fast, she is constantly forced into reaching downward rather than swinging freely through her preferred contact zone. The geometry of the surface works directly against her. Every low skidding ball forces her entire body to readjust just to find a clean point of contact. Those constant micro-adjustments compress her decision-making time, which shrinks the variety of shots she can produce, which in turn makes her significantly easier to read and anticipate. Compare that with what Eala has been doing on grass throughout 2026. 9 wins against 3 losses this season alone, 24 wins and 11 losses across her entire career on the surface, a title, a deep semifinal run, back-to-back victories over 2 top 10 players inside the same week. The sample size is large enough now that calling any of this a fluke simply doesn't hold up anymore. She is genuinely excellent on grass, arguably better here than on any other surface she plays. And yet, the serve. It remains a real and ongoing question mark that anyone watching this match needs to keep a close eye on throughout. It was a problem back in Carolina. It was still a visible issue even during her brilliant run in Berlin, where, despite hitting 4 aces in one match, she has still not developed the kind of consistently reliable power or placement on her first delivery that would make her service games feel safe and routine. The second serve, in particular, practically invites aggression, sitting up nicely in the strike zone, giving returners a clean, comfortable look at the ball. Her opponent on Monday isn't a powerful returner by any stretch, but she is an extremely experienced one, and experienced returners know precisely what to do with a soft, sitting second serve. Step inside the baseline, take it early, redirect it into a corner before the server has any chance to recover position. If the veteran can consistently turn those service games into genuine contests rather than free points, this match becomes significantly more interesting than the betting markets currently suggest. Speaking of the markets, the veteran opened at odds translating to roughly a 20% chance of winning. The bookmakers have essentially already written her out of contention before a ball has been struck. And that kind of imbalance is worth sitting with for a moment. Because when a player walks onto a court with absolutely nothing to lose and everything to potentially gain, something genuinely shifts in how they're able to compete. She can play with total freedom, no weight of expectation pressing down on every point, no anxiety about what a loss might mean for her ranking, her reputation, or the millions of people watching back home. She can simply go out and play tennis. Eala doesn't get that same luxury, not even close. She is carrying the heaviest seeding any Filipino player has ever worn into a Grand Slam tournament. She is carrying the hopes of an entire community scattered across the globe. Fans who stayed up through the night in Manila to watch Birmingham, who tracked every point in Berlin on their phones, who genuinely believe they are watching something generational unfold in real time. That is fuel, absolutely. But it is also weight, real, tangible weight. And Wimbledon carries its own gravitational pull that no warm-up tournament anywhere on the circuit can fully prepare you for. Being the seeded favorite, the player the crowd has traveled across oceans to watch, the player journalists are filing stories about before the tournament has even started, introduces a flavor of pressure that is genuinely unlike anything she has faced in her young career. The margin for error feels smaller, even when it isn't. The crowd reacts to every point in a way that amplifies everything. A double fault in Birmingham feels like a footnote. A double fault in a tight game at Wimbledon with a partisan crowd watching can feel like a crisis. That said, and this is worth remembering, she has already shown signs she can handle versions of exactly this. Witnesses in Birmingham described the atmosphere as transformative for such a small venue, with Filipino supporters turning out in numbers that completely changed the energy of what is normally a quiet, low-key, mid-tier event. She played straight through it, handled the noise and the weight of expectation, and converted it into clean, aggressive tennis that looked nothing like someone being crushed by the moment. Then she went to Berlin as a wild card that nobody expected anything from and handled the complete opposite kind of pressure. The freedom of zero expectation, the looseness of playing with nothing to lose, and converted that into 2 statement victories over top 10 opposition.
She has proven she can compete in both of those emotional registers. That is genuinely no small thing for someone this young. Her opponent, for all her experience, is navigating a different kind of psychological challenge entirely. She has been here before in the broadest sense. She knows what a Grand Slam first round feels like, knows how to absorb that atmosphere without flinching. She qualified for the French Open back in 2020 and became the first Mexican woman in 2 decades to reach a Slam main draw. She upset a top 6 player at last year's US Open in a 3-set battle decided by the narrowest of margins imaginable. She has beaten players on these very Wimbledon courts before, reaching the second round here just last year. None of that paints the picture of someone who crumbles under pressure on the biggest stages, but knowing how to compete inside a Grand Slam atmosphere and knowing how to compete on a surface that actively undermines your entire game plan are 2 completely separate skills. And on grass, specifically, her best weapons become noticeably harder to deploy and far easier for a sharp opponent to anticipate. There is, however, one tactical wrinkle worth understanding clearly before Monday arrives. The veteran possesses a backhand slice that, when struck well on grass, stays brutally low and skids sideways in a way that has caused real discomfort for plenty of better-ranked players throughout her career. If she can land that slice consistently and force uncomfortable low contact points over and over again, the entire complexion of this match could shift in ways the odds simply aren't accounting for right now. It is the one weapon in her arsenal that the surface doesn't completely neutralize, the one tool she can deploy that actually gets more effective, not less, on these loans. But here is the honest assessment of where everything stands heading into Monday. The ranking gap is real. The form gap is real. The surface advantage belongs convincingly to Eala. The veteran's best path to an upset runs directly through the same blueprint she used in Carolina: slow everything down, dismantle the rhythm, make Eala manufacture pace from nothing, and wait for the double faults to arrive on the second serve. It is a legitimate path. It has worked before, and the fact that it happened once means the psychological thread connecting that afternoon in North Carolina to this first round at Wimbledon is absolutely real. But Eala in 2026 is not Eala in 2024. The player who walked off that court in Carolina having watched a controlled match dissolve through her own hands has spent 2 years doing exactly the kind of work that prevents that from happening again. The ranking climb from 140 to 29 is not a gift. The title in Birmingham is not a coincidence. The back-to-back top 10 wins in Berlin against one of the most powerful servers alive and one of the best defensive players on the tour are not flukes. They are evidence. Evidence of a player who has genuinely figured something out about her own game, about the surface, about what she is capable of when everything clicks. The weight of history she is carrying into Wimbledon is enormous, but history at this point is already made. She is already the first. What happens inside that court on Monday is about something else entirely, about whether a 21-year-old carrying an entire nation on her shoulders can channel all of that into the same flat, aggressive, rhythm-disrupting tennis that has made her almost impossible to beat on grass this year, and whether a 33-year-old veteran with a blueprint that works, a surface that doesn't suit her, and nothing whatsoever to lose, can find a way to pull off the kind of upset that reminds everyone watching exactly why professional tennis remains one of the most unpredictable sports on the planet. One match, Wimbledon, everything at stake, and the exact story of how it ends is the one detail none of us have yet.